In the face of this overwhelming empire that seems to be sucking in all authority on earth and demanding that everyone bow to them, Jesus is in control, and it's good to be on his team. John is clearly laying out that Jesus is the sum of these prophecies. Since Domitian had already deified himself, I guess his son was a god too. So they made this coin on the back of it. He has these 7 stars. There's no doubt that it's a symbol of power, and that the Romans knew and that the Romans used. He's saying is that the power that these Romans claim, that they think they're exercising over you, I got that.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Land in the Bible podcast. Today we are in episode 2 of Churches of Revelation. And today I'm here with Jamison Creel. How you doing, Jamison?
Man, I'm doing great.
Awesome. So last week we kind of gave a little bit of intro to the historical context, a little bit on Revelation, but more around the context of who John was writing to, why he was writing, a little bit about where he was writing from and what led up to
the historical background, when he was writing, what was going on. That's pretty much what we covered.
And so today, before we jump into the churches, one of the things we were going to do is we were going to kind of unpack a little bit more of the portrayal of Jesus in this.
Yeah, but because it's kind of funny. Like, you look at the opening sentence in Revelation chapter 1. It says the revelation of Jesus Christ that God gave to him to show his slaves what must quickly take place. But it's the revelation of Jesus Christ, So, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of it is about who Jesus is. And he even goes on to say to his slave John, who testified to God's word, the testimony about Jesus Christ and all he saw. So at the end of the day, we get so wrapped up in, and I don't want to go down this road again. We did it in the first episode, but we get so wrapped up in, we read all this stuff in Revelation, and actually the main point is who's Jesus, So in the face of this overwhelming empire that seems to be sucking in all authority on earth and demanding that everyone bow to them, in the face of that oppression, torment, who's Jesus? That's what the book is really answering. It is, if the Romans are threatening to take away your business and socially ostracize you and then maybe torture and kill you, do you still want to bow to Jesus, or do you want to bow to the Romans? Like, that's what it's, and it's really a revelation who Jesus Christ is. And that he's going to be victorious. He's going to win. And those who stand with him will be on the winning team in the end. I think it's, at the end of the day, if you wanted to summarize the book, is to say that Jesus is in control and it's good to be on his team, And so I just want to talk really, quickly about how Jesus is portrayed, particularly in John chapter 1. It says this, starting in verse 4. I'll skip around a little bit. It says, grace peace be upon you, the one who is, who was, and who is coming. So even there you have John again, always with eternal, the deity of Christ, and wanting to emphasize to these churches that are they're tormented that Jesus is, okay, so he's the I am deity. He was, because, he was here on earth for those 33 years of his incarnation, on earth in Judea and Galilee, but also he is coming, so we want to emphasize the return as well, that the king is going to come back, so you get that, like, that's one of the very first sentences in the whole book, right? From the 7 spirits for his throne, and from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn from the dead. Okay. There's another, thing where he's just emphasizing who Jesus is. And this is kind of a big deal to me in a way, just in regard to how my thinking has changed over the course of years. When I was a little kid, and you see this in general art, like maybe when you were a kid, back when we were kids, cartoons were violent. You had Tom and Jerry trying to kill each other. You had the Roadrunner and the Coyote trying to, they're pretty violent. Popeye's always fighting, play, whatever. I don't know. Like, now kids, They can't handle violence, but they can handle other stuff that seems worse. But anyway, um,
In video games. It's just been
oh
around
yeah,
video
that's
games.
true. Actually, video games are still hyper violent. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
forget Roadrunner was doing that first. Come on.
Runner was dropping anvils on people's heads from cliffs and stuff like that. But back in those days, it didn't kill you. Just like made you go like, "Ooh," and like the little stars would go around your head and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But so you may have seen somebody die in a cartoon, and they kind of like go tweet, 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 tweet. They sprout the angel wings and they sort of float up, to heaven, and they're on a cloud with a harp or something. And and that's kind of how heaven was portrayed. Was you sit around on you're sort of disembodied, you're sort of in spirit form, and you sit around on clouds, playing harps. Or if you went to like a really strict church, heaven was portrayed as like 100,000 year long church service. The second one sounded like torture when I was a kid. I was like, man, I don't know about heaven. This sounds rough. I don't want to sit on a cloud playing a harp the rest of eternity. I
Mhm.
also don't want to go to church for like 1,000 years. That sounds terrible. What I have come to believe later in life is my perspective has matured is that first off, we do not spend eternity in a place called heaven. We spend eternity on a new earth. Like we're meant to be embodied, to be physical. And the fact that Jesus's body was resurrected, he wasn't just, now what happens when you die and you go to be with God until the resurrection? Like that is up for great debate in Christian, theology. The Bible to me clearly says to be absent from the body, to be present with the Lord. So I do believe that you go to some place to wait that's maybe more pleasant than earth is, but in the end, I believe fully because the Bible says it that we're raised. That Jesus was the first born from the dead. That our bodies are completely reconstituted and we will live as physical embodied beings again. And that Jesus is the first one of those. Okay, I think that's
Mhm.
just clearly stated, and that's John again making a statement about who Jesus is. If you follow him, you're one of his people, then you're going to get to do this, which I think that's good. I'm down. Once it goes on to say, to him who loves us and has set us free from our sins by his blood. So, again, John is repeating who Jesus is. But I want to skip down to some of the things. Well, no, let's just skip down to verse 7. And it says this, because I think you have an interesting interweaving of Old Testament. And what you see is the book of Revelation constantly refers to Old Testament prophets, whether it's Daniel or Ezekiel or Zechariah. Like first off, it's clear that John was completely steeped in his Old Testament, that he knew it inside and out, and that he had had decades to think about who Jesus was in light of this stuff. And for him, this just flowed, that. And so he says, look, he is coming in the clouds. Okay. That's clearly a reference to Daniel. Daniel chapter 7 says, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. Okay. So clearly that's a reference to that scripture. But then it also says, and every eye will see him, including those who pierced him, and all the families of earth will mourn over him, which is clearly reference to Zechariah. Okay. So Zechariah 12:10 says, let me find a translation I actually want to look at, says, then I will pour out a spirit of grace and prayer on the house of David and the residents of Jerusalem, and they will look at me whom they pierced, and they will mourn for him as one who mourns an only child, weeps for a firstborn. Okay, so you clearly have this, not just messianic, but, I want to say a reference that it's hard to say that the Messiah is not God. You have a deistic almost prophecy of the one to come. And clearly it's being referred to the Jesus of this person. Okay. So John is clearly laying out that Jesus is the sum of these prophecies, and that's just absolutely clearly true. Then you get the famous quote, that people often, when people think about John and his articulation of who Jesus is, I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the one who is and who was and is coming. So, the beginning and the end, that everything starts with and ends with Jesus, you know, super important. But I wanted to mention what it says a little bit down lower in the chapter where you get some of this symbolism and just talk through what that's telling us about who Jesus is. So John, if you go to verse 7, says, I turned to see whose voice it was that spoke to me. And when I turned, I saw 7 gold lampstands. And among the lampstand was one like the Son of Man. Again, a reference to Daniel, dressed in a long robe with a gold sash wrapped around his chest. His head and hair were white like wool, white as snow, and his eyes like a fiery flame. The lampstands symbolize the churches. There's no question, because later on in the letters, he talks about, if you keep this up, I will take away your lampstand. Okay, so clearly the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. And he says, I saw 7 gold lampstands, the churches, and among the lampstands was one like the Son of Man. So what that is saying clearly in the symbolism is that Jesus moves among the churches. Okay. He's not distant. He's not, in the letters to churches, he's going to say over and over again, I see, I know, I know. I see your suffering. I know your works. I see your persecution. I know he's constantly telling them, I see and I know. And so what John is, I think, wanting to communicate to us is that Jesus is not removed. So, and again, he's talking to churches that are under heavy persecution. He doesn't want them to think for even 1 minute that Jesus came to earth, did his thing, got crucified, and now he's back up in heaven, partying, relaxing, taking the weekend off, while the churches down here are just getting punched in the face by the emperor and under this heavy, heavy persecution. And John is saying, no, he moves among the lampstands. Okay. He's walking among, he's looking at, tending to, he's active in his church. He's caring for you. You don't always see it. You don't always know it, but he's there and he's taking care of things. And I think this is maybe, again, talking about churches under persecution, that maybe it's worthwhile to sort of just like pause. And when it talks about the one who was, is, and is coming. When we talk about Jesus, particularly in Protestant churches these days, we really, really just accentuate and expound upon, highlight the kindness and the grace and all that kind of stuff of Christ, as we should. He is loving. He's defined by love. He's willing to die for us. He is full of grace. He's willing to forgive you at any moment of anything you've done, if you will but repent and accept his lordship. These things are all absolutely, completely true. But what we don't sometimes think about is the fact that when Jesus was here on earth, he only fulfilled half the prophecies about himself. You go to Isaiah 61, which is what he's quoting in Nazareth, when he says, I'm here to declare the day of the Lord's favor. And then he closes it and sits down. The reason they got mad at him, it was because he didn't read the next sentence or even the next clause, and the Lord's wrath. When vengeance and, when he's going to kill the unbelievers and punish people. And what we don't think about is that, well, that's still there. That's still, like he's given us these last 2,000 years to share his grace and forgiveness with the world. But there is a time that comes when now it's time for justice. And I think we've made almost a bad word out of justice. You've got, Gandhi's sort of famous snarky quote, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth makes all the world blind or whatever. Well, that's a dumb thing to say, just to be honest with you, because it's not accurate. And if you go back and you understand Moses' formulation there, what Moses was doing was he was stopping escalating violence, where you knock out my eye and I kill your son,
It was actually an innovation.
It was a crazy innovation. It was a huge step in a world where, again, like retribution was far worse than what you had done. To say, no, we're going to do justice. Now, was Jesus going even farther to say, actually, let's do grace? Absolutely. But the same Bible that talks about the grace of Christ and his forgiveness also says that God's throne rests on justice and righteousness. And so those aren't bad words, And I think we have to know that. I mean, doesn't your heart cry out for someone to come back and fix it? And I think that at the end of the day, if you just want to summarize all of this, I think that's kind of what he's saying. Is it like, man, it's a mess right now. You're good people. You love the Lord. You're being treated horribly by this culture. You're being abused, isolated, made fun of, ridiculed, kicked out of businesses, in extreme cases, tortured, killed. All this stuff is happening to you. And, even the Old Testament prophets would say things like that. Lord, why do the violent always win? Why does justice never win? Why is it always, why do the bad guys always get away with it and the good guys suffer? Like, why the heathen, that kind of thing is, it just pours out of the heart of, why is it like this? And all throughout history, people have found men or women that they thought might fix it. And they're like, well, we're going to get behind this guy, whether that's on the right or the left, whether that's a Stalin or a Reagan, it doesn't matter. You pick a human and you think they're going to fix it.
And you're
They're
not
probably
drawing
not.
a comparison to those two.
Well, I'm just trying to say, like, whichever side you're on, if you're way left or way right, if you think that there's a human who's going to come along and you're going to follow them, no, I'm not saying they're the same.
I know.
But I'm saying, like, you think this guy's going to fix it. Like, no, they're not. They're
No.
not, because the world, I mean, obviously I think there are some human, regimes that are far worse than others. As much as I think the American system is flawed, it's a lot better than Nazi Germany, or Stalinist Russia, clearly, or Mao's China, you know. So, I'm not saying there's no difference. It's clear there are differences, but the idea that you're going to have a human who's going to fix it is just not true. I think we all know that. And so I think we do yearn for someone to come and fix it. And a part of us does yearn for, just being honest, like, I don't want to go around being the agent of justice and, like, smiting the bad guys. I don't want that job. It's not mine. But there is a part of us that kind of wants that. Like, you're like, come on, God, are they never going to pay for this? Are they never going to pay for what they've done? Now, you should be careful with that and ask yourself, what do I owe for? What have I done that I should pay for? If you're really demanding justice for people, check yourself first. But we do want it. We want people who suffered innocently to be rewarded and paid back. And we want people who were the tormentors to be paid back. We simply do. And I don't think that's actually wrong. We long for someone to come back and fix it. And what he's saying is, like, Jesus is that. He is going to come back and he's going to set things straight. And if you, I mean, read all, again, we always emphasize, happy, good Jesus, but, there are some parables that are rough. If the master comes back and you're beating his servants, what's going to happen to you? If the master comes back and you're just lazing around, not doing anything, what's going to happen to you? And he certainly implies that it may not go so good. So I think he is sort of emphasizing on that when he says things like he has fiery eyes of flame and things like that. His voice is like cascading waters, like he's going to come back, like it's going to be in power. It's not going to be this guy getting crucified and beaten up and dying. It's not going to be the humble guy coming on a donkey. It's going to be a war horse. It's going to be in power. I think he's clearly saying that. And that guy is moving among those lampstands and he's watching. And if you're suffering innocently at the hands of this empire, just know that this God is going to have eternity to pay you back for what you suffered, to reward you, and to pay them back for what they did to you. That there is justice. I think that's, clearly what's being said here. He's seeing, he's watching, he's actively involved, but also the time of judgment will come, which is what the whole book's about, really, right? Is that at the end there is justice. All right, one more symbolism that I just kind of wanted to mention is it says, so he's moving around, there's lots of sevens, by the way, but it says that he had 7 stars in his right hand. There was a coin printed by Domitian. It's called the Aureus of Domitian. It was minted in 82 through 83. What happened was Domitian had a son who died in childhood, 3 years old when he died. Since Domitian had already deified himself, I guess his son was a god too. So they made this coin. On the back of it, you had this little fat naked baby kind of doing this number, and he sat on the globe. So he's up in the heavens, ruling over the world or whatever. And he has these 7 stars that are kind of coming out of his hands or like around his hands like this. And I think those stars are clearly, we can get into details of exactly why they might represent, the power of the Roman Empire. But, or even more than that, it might represent the realm of the dead and the undead and where the gods live. But it certainly is a symbol of Roman power and maybe even the power of the gods. Okay, there's no doubt that it's a symbol of power, and that the Romans knew and that the Romans used. And so when he says, "I have that in my right hand," what he's saying is that the power that these Romans claim, that they think that they have, that they think they're exercising over you, yeah, I've like got that right here. I got that, you know? Um, so like that's a clear, strong image that he's using that they would have known. They would have seen on their coins they used every day. And then he also goes on to say, this is the last thing. He says, "The secret of the 7 stars you saw in my right hand of the 7 gold lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the angel of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches." So you just know those symbols can mean more than one thing. Okay. So, I mean, clearly here he says the stars are the 7 churches, but it's also a symbol of Roman power. So the 7 stars are the angel of the churches. Okay. Angel just means messenger. You're talking about the pastor or the leader of the churches. And the 7 lampstands are the churches. If you go back to verse 11 near the top, it says, "Write on a scroll what you see and send it to the 7 churches in Ephesus, Smyrna," and we'll get to the list later. And the point of all that to say is that we clearly then know that Jesus is instructing John to write to the leaders of those churches. I just wanted to, clarify who the angel was, because, it's like, what? There's an angel of the churches? Like, well, yeah, there's the angel. The word angel just means messenger. We've expanded it, to have, to reference only spiritual beings, but it means messenger. So the messenger of the churches. Again, you can use symbolic language. So I don't think any theologian argues the fact that he's talking about the pastors of the church and the leaders. So write to the leaders, tell them this, and then obviously deliver that message to these churches. And so to set up the rest of what we're going to talk about for the next 7 episodes, Jesus is then going to go one by one through these 7 churches and basically give them a personal statement. Here's what you're doing good. Here's what you're doing bad. Here's how you should change it. And here's what you should know about me. He's just going to give each of them a little, like, here's something from me. And, anytime we read Bible, don't always think of yourself as Moses or Daniel or Jesus in the stories. Maybe any given day you're more like Judas or Peter or Pontius Pilate or a member of the Sanhedrin. Like, you're not always the good guy in the story, just so you'll know. And so some of these churches 2 of them come across real like, you're doing great. Some of them come across like, ugh, they really get spanked a little bit. And then most of them gets kind of like a little good, a little bad. So like, I think it's good to just read them and be open to what's the Bible saying about what's supposed to be our attitude towards Christ and what our churches are supposed to be like and not be like, and what he's saying. So the Jesus who was, is coming, superpower, God coming in justice is going to set it right and going to judge. He's watching. You should be on his team. Be faithful to him. Don't worry about this dumb emperor, his little baby sitting on a globe juggling stars. Like, they're not the bosses. Jesus is.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good. I think these first 2 episodes have been super helpful to like create some context, because you can get in the weeds with Revelation pretty easily. And so I think as we're going through this has been good just to kind of set the framework and like set our focus on what we can take away. So next episode, we're going to be jumping into the second church, Smyrna. And we're going to take it from there, explore the historical context, explore kind of, you visited each of these.
I've been to all of them. We haven't been there and filmed properly yet. Maybe hopefully we can get that done in the future.
So you've done an exploratory trip.
Yeah, I've been to all of them. I've been to all of them once, but 3, basically, don't tell anybody, but 2 of them are not as nice as the others. So Sardis and Thyatira and Philadelphia, not as much to see there. Whereas some of them are spectacular. So like Ephesus, Laodicea, Pergamum in particular are just spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
Smyrna is photogenic. It's smaller, but it's real pretty. So, there's some of them you're like, I'm good. I don't. So I've been to Ephesus more times than I can count now.
Yeah.
I've been to Pergamum 3 or 4 times, but yes, Thyatira and Philadelphia and Sardis, those were one-offs. But I mean, I will go back. We'll go back.
But we're definitely going to go and do a trip where we take the audience there and get to explore it. So if you do end up enjoying this series, just know that there will be a premium series available, full Bible study, full, travel show meets a Bible study series, as we call it, over on the landofthebible.com in the future. But as always, if you guys are enjoying this and you want to hear more content like it, go over to landofthebible.com, subscribe on YouTube, or just listen wherever podcasts are playing. And we will see you next time.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, click like and subscribe. It really helps us. And if you really enjoyed it, go on over to our website, landofthebible.com, and become a supporter. It helps us generate more content and gives you access to our full library of video and Bible study content.